What's up, everyone? Thanks for checking into our latest TDR Cannabis in 5. I'm your host, Shad Dales. 5 minutes, that's all you need to get caught up on what's happening in the world of cannabis policy. So let's dive into it because we got an interesting one here tonight that we found out while we were in Vegas this week, where a single senator has put the brakes on a major White House nomination, and it's got the cannabis community buzzing indeed. So according to a recent report by Yes Marijuana Moment, a Democratic senator blocked the confirmation of nearly 90 nominees from the current administration, including the president's pick for the country's next top drug policy official. So that nominee is slated to lead the official national drug policy, aka the ONDCP. As we know, that pick is Sara Carter Bailey. She's a former journalist and a commentator. And the senator who slammed the brakes on the confirmation is Michael Bennet from Colorado. So why? So Bennet said point blank, he blocked the 88 nominee package because it included unqualified candidates, including Bailey. So he argued that bundling her in with other appointees undermined norms around drug policy appointments, and said he would not allow nominations that threaten the rule of law and our national security to advance. This is a growing sentiment in Washington right now. So that means for at least now, Sara Carter Bailey's confirmation is on hold. So as we bring this all together, why does this matter for cannabis policy? Well, that's where things get interesting. For one, Sara Carter Bailey isn't just some random pick. She's previously voiced support for medical marijuana. In fact, furthermore, during a 2023 episode of her own podcast, she said she believes cannabis for medicinal purposes can be a wonderful option for people with serious illnesses like cancer, especially to help them handle pain and side effects. Furthermore, she also said she doesn't have a problem with legalization as long as it's regulated and monitored, which makes sense, because really that kind of position is fairly rare among federal level drug czar nominees. Many previous ONDCP directors avoided support for medical or recreational cannabis, so this is different. And the fact that she publicly supported medical cannabis even while stopping short of endorsing full rescheduling, it definitely drew some optimism for reform advocates. Moreover, during her confirmation hearing earlier in 2025, she told senators that the administration was keeping all options on the table for ongoing rescheduling. And she also described cannabis reform as a bipartisan issue. So if confirmed, she would have been the second person in a row to have the ONDCP while voicing support for medical cannabis. So when we look back at the previous director, it had similar leanings. And before we get into more of today's podcast, a quick word now from Morgan & Morgan. There's a reason smart investors celebrate when their portfolio jumps 40% in a year, just like there's a reason Morgan & Morgan is America's largest injury law firm. Think about it. When you're investing, you want the right team in your corner. The same is true if you're injured in dealing with an insurance company. And that is where Morgan & Morgan comes into the equation. Why? Well, they've got more than 1,000 attorneys in over 100 offices nationwide, and they've been fighting for people for over 35 years, and their track record is hard to ignore. Case in point, in Florida, a client was offered $350,000, but walked away with $12 million. So in total, Morgan & Morgan, they've recovered more than $25 billion for over 500,000 clients. Because if you're injured due to someone else's negligence, you deserve to be paid. Not all law firms are created equal, but with Morgan & Morgan, their fee is free unless they win. You can start your claim right now by clicking the link in the description below or by scanning this QR code on your screen with your phone. At the end of the day, if you want what you deserve, make sure you go in with the right team by contacting Morgan & Morgan today. All right, welcome back. So on paper, this nomination, it seemed like a potential win, maybe even a turning point for cannabis reform at the federal level. But as always, as we know in this industry, not so fast. So as we said earlier, the Senate block throws a wrench into things. This isn't even argued to be about her cannabis views, rather it's about procedure, precedent, and whether or not she's qualified for a high-level post that affects national drug policy. Senator Bennet and others argue that the role of the ONDCP director is too important to be handed to someone without the medical, law enforcement, or even addiction policy background, which, as we know, is typically expected for the job. So are they getting kind of some pressure here when you look at people like Bondi, Hegseth, Kash Patel? Don't kid yourself, this has something to do with it, and a growing sentiment as to who's qualified within this Trump administration. So what now? What does it mean? Well, the legislation, regulations, rescheduling discussions, and the broader national approach to cannabis, it will remain uncertain. What else is new? If the block holds, well, the White House may need to resubmit her nomination for individual full consideration. And the other side is if they don't, or if a different nominee is selected, well, then guess what? Not the news that we want, but the future of federal cannabis policy under this administration could look very different. So for advocates, patients, growers, businesses, a lot is riding right now on who becomes the next ONDCP director. So the big question now is, where do we go from here? So first, keep an eye on the Senate. If the White House resubmits the nomination, it might go to a full floor vote and could pass if there is enough support. But on the other hand, if senators decide to push back on repeated nominations, we could see long delays or a completely different candidate emerge. So keep your eye on that. Second, note the broader context. The political winds around cannabis have been shifting, as we know. So with more states legalizing medical and even recreational marijuana, a federal level nominee who supports medical cannabis, it could indeed signal a long-term change in how the U.S. handles cannabis. Because the fact that someone would publicly state support for medical cannabis was even nominated at this level, it shows just how much things have definitely moved. And finally, whether you support cannabis reform or just want to follow policy, this moment indeed definitely matters. Why? Because who ends up running the ONDCP, they can definitely shape funding priorities, enforcement approaches, rescheduling efforts, and really how the federal government interacts with states. And that is something that needs to be done. So every piece affects patients, businesses, public health, and civil liberties, as we know, especially for those that follow the space. So that's it for our latest Cannabis in 5 update. The nomination right now is blocked, but things could still move quickly. So definitely this is an important moment for cannabis policy, and without saying it, we will be watching this further closely. So if you want to know all the latest information pertaining to it, make sure to like, subscribe, and smash on that bell, and stay connected with us here at TDR Cannabis in 5, and give us your feedback. I know this is frustrating based on this news this week, but what do you think happens next? Leave your comments below, and again, I'd love to get your feedback to keep this conversation going. That's it for now, everybody. Enjoy your weekend. We'll see you back here next week. I'm your host, Shad Dales. This has been the latest TDR Cannabis in 5, and again, thanks for watching. Take care, everyone.